Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the People Advisory BDO webinar for, I don't even know, what month are we in? April 2020. We've decided to do this one a little differently today. So normally, for those of you who attend our webinar meetings, you'll know that you don't usually see us. You see a screen with usually some great slides. But today we felt that given everything else has shifted in our world over the last couple of months, maybe we should shift our webinar format as well. So we're going to make this an interactive discussion, which it normally is, frankly, because you can never stop any one of us from talking anyway. We're going to make it interactive. We very much would love to hear from you. So I'm going to quickly whip through some housekeeping issues before we kick off the discussion. And excuse me while I read my slides so I don't forget anything. So first of all, you can submit questions in the questions pane, and all submitted questions will be responded to wherever we possibly can during the course of the session. If for some reason we can't respond to it in the session today, we will respond afterwards via email, or we'll give you a call if you leave us your details. The questions, we won't be referring to people by name or company, etc. So they are anonymous. If you've got a burning question you've wanted to ask, but you haven't wanted to associate yourself with it, then by all means go right ahead and post it there, and we'll get to them as quickly as we can through the presentation. There is just one presentation slide loaded into the webinar as a handout for you to access, and that just takes you through how to make sure you're on the webinar properly and how to post questions. So by all means, click on that. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, click support or visit https://support.goto.com/webinar. And post the session today, you'll be sent with a follow-up email. No slides will be coming your way this time, but you will get a link back to this webinar. So if there was anything that we discussed that you really want to watch again, or if you haven't had a time to listen to the whole thing, you'll have that and you can listen to it at your leisure during the course of today. One quick disclaimer, obviously all opinions discussed today will be our own. So we have all care and lots of experience that goes into it, but it's very much general advice that we're giving. And if you really need some specific advice, please either reach out to us directly or legal advice, etc. Access that. So we might kick off with a few introductions. For those of you who haven't been on one of our webinars before, my name is Janine Waters. I lead our People Advisory team for BDO nationally, and I'm joined by two of my amazing Sydney colleagues. Callie Mitchell up in the right-hand screen there. Callie is manager in our business and she leads our virtual HR function. So she provides outsourced HR services for a world of different organisations and has amazing experience across so many different industries now. And Marianne Carter is Associate Director in our team. She has 20-odd years in HR roles, and she's an amazing organisational development resource. So she does everything to do with leadership, people, change in our organisation. So, and myself, 20 years in HR experience as well. So for those of you who are coming to us from internal HR roles, we have been in your shoes, and we have felt the joy and the challenges and the pain of those roles. And we now have quite a few years of consulting experience under our belts as well. So we have some breadth of perspectives that hopefully we can bring to the discussion today. So welcome, team. Callie, I know you've put a lot of thought into what we're going to discuss today, and you've got a lot of burning issues that people have been, talking to you about. So I might hand over to you if you want to kick us off.
Absolutely. Thank you, Janine. Well, certainly we're in very strange times, but it looks like the horizon is just around the corner and we're almost there. So let's start it off. Where have we come from? What's changed over the last few months? And what is the new normal going to be? Marianne, over to you.
Well, the new normal is going to be different for just about every organisation if they allow it to be. So if we just think back to how we were when this first hit, for those of us that could work from home, that juggle started. And it started with whether you had kids at home, for other people you were working with at home, roommates. and your ability to try to juggle all of it and trying to get onto the webinars and the meetings was beyond exhausting. Emotionally, a lot of people would be working many hours and just come out of it going, oh, I'm not sure what I've done, what did I achieve? And that peak, that adrenaline of trying to keep going, for many employees is beginning to calm down a little bit now.
Yeah.
And so now the ability of where you are going to take your organisation and how far you go is going to be really reliant on how good is your leadership, what kind of platform do you have to be having discussions with your leaders about what they should be listening to and what's going on. And I think they're the kinds of things we're going to start talking about today.
Absolutely. There's a really good sort of diagram that's going around many platforms, and it talks about the 3 different zones. There's that initial fear zone and the elements that people are feeling within that. Then there's the learning zone. What can we do differently? How can we adapt? How can we be resilient? And then into that growth zone, thinking about others and how can I actually help? Having a clear picture of what might possibly be next. And just not sitting there waiting for it to happen, being really reactive and really moving forward, because this is life. We can't change it, it's happening. So it's really about, being grateful and being appreciative that, we're, from Australia's perspective anyway, that we're almost seeing the end of this.
It'd be nice to think that we are, and I'm very hopeful that we are. It's interesting, I look at that diagram and I remember I posted it on LinkedIn probably about a week or 2 into all of this, and to be perfectly frank, I was pretty well in the fear zone at that point. There's so much going on, so much outside of the realm of our experience before, and you're on it and you're coping and you're moving through it. But I think the biggest challenge for all of us through this is you don't get to move out of the fear zone without some conscious thought and investment in the way you're thinking, in the way you're managing through that. And I know certainly within our team, we've been working really hard to try to make sure that we're not just thinking about the immediacy of the challenges that we're facing, but earlier, as it was probably about 3 weeks ago, we started to say, so what's the future look like? And I think in organisations now, making sure that you are on the front foot of that thinking is really important, that you're creating space and time to think about the future beyond COVID-19. I don't know about you two, but I felt like when we have those sessions and when we focus on that sort of thinking, the entire mood of the team changes. The level of certainty you have that this is going to be an interesting period of our lives, but we will come through it really well. That shifts, I think.
Absolutely. So Mary, how do we work with our leaders then to actually make this happen?
So from a HR perspective, what I will say is I think this is the time for HR to shine even more than what it already has been.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are some clients that have gotten rid of their HR departments when this hit, because they were looking very much short term, where can we be saving money? And those businesses, I can tell you, are actually in a lot of pain right now. And so for those businesses that see the value of HR and give you the opportunity to actually step up, your ability to now manage getting leadership to think more longer term and then make decisions on the here and now is going to be very, very powerful. So even really something very simple, such as if we would think about recruitment, a lot of the big recruitment teams are saying to their managing directors, their GMs, now is the time to go out and be branding. Now is the time to be showcasing what our employees are doing and how we are treating our employees, because these are the stories and the memories people will be remembering. And so where organizations are forward thinking, they're saying, yes, we're going to do that. But a lot of them are still out there saying, no, we're not going out. We've got to freeze on recruitment. We can't in good faith do anything differently. So it's now about HR challenging some of that thinking to say, if the roles we're talking about are roles we know we're going to need when we come out the other end, if we cannot physically advertise right now for whatever reason, how do we brand ourselves? How do we get out there visibly so people know we're there? We don't want to be competing with other companies when they all come out at the same time. So you really, this is an opportunity to differentiate yourselves. So that's just one example. Janine?
I think it's a really great one, Marianne, because I know you and I have this conversation and this debate, having worked in in-house HR and then in consulting and in a few different industries. One of the things that I have noticed over time, and maybe it's more in the Australian market, is in some sectors and some areas a devaluing of HR. So almost a bit push them into a box or take out a lot of the resources. It's a cost to the business, those sorts of things. And I don't know about you, but I see COVID-19 as such an amazing opportunity for HR leaders to step up and say, now can you understand the value and the importance of having really strong HR in your organisation? Because really fundamentally, COVID-19, more than anything else, has been all about people, hasn't it? It's been all about how we as an organisation respond from a people perspective, how we mobilise, how we support our people. And, you know, we see a lot of branding, good and bad, happening at the moment for organisations, because to your point, this is an opportunity where you can show just how amazing you've been as an organisation, living to your values, treating your employees with dignity and respect. And it can also be a time where your employees are going out and delivering very different messages about who you are as an organisation. So it's been an interesting time for me talking to some of my connections, where some of them are saying, oh, we're really struggling to use our values during this time. We're really struggling to make decisions. We're running on decisions that have a financial implication. We're running on the decisions based on what the government is saying, and then we're stepping back and going, oh, did we actually make those calls aligned to our values or not? And the feedback I give, and you and I just had some interesting discussion around that, Marianne, my thoughts are, if your values aren't real during a crisis, if your values aren't driving your decisions in a period of crisis, then there's probably a couple of things. Either they're not the right values for your organisation, you're not actually truly aligned to them, they're a pretty piece of paper but you never really embedded them. Or to your point, I think, Marianne, there's probably a maturity around how you use values in making decisions that could be worked on. What have you seen around that?
So what I've seen is, for companies where investors are very important, and long-term investors in particular, what they are looking for is a company that can have the long-term view but execute for the here and now. So to execute for the here and now, you need to anchor it on something solid. And one of the things you can anchor it in from a HR perspective is your values. And the reason why we're suggesting that is because what investors want to see is that you are treating your employees with dignity and respect. You're keeping them safe. You're thinking about what it is that they need right now. Because coming out the other side of this, and even we're seeing now in the blogs, up on LinkedIn, employees are being very vocal about how they are being treated. And it's those stories that actually sit in the minds of your customers, in the minds of your stakeholders, and it's the story that you can actually influence. So when you are anchored into your values, challenge your leaders. How is it in line with, let's say, one of your values is bold, as it is for us at BDO? Yeah. How are you being bold in this? Are we just being scared? What's the worst that can happen if we go down this path? So it's okay to be holding their feet to the fire and getting them to flex that muscle and starting to use it.
That's great. So it's all about understanding, you know, what you want to be known for when you come out the other end. What was it that your organisation said about you or says about you from that customer perspective or that stakeholder perspective?
You know, a lot of the research shows that when companies have gone through big downturns before and really trying times, they will actually come out of it a lot faster if they've treated their employees with respect and they've started to think a little more long term. And so what we're finding now is a lot of our clients that are a little more forward thinking, so they've gotten themselves out of that panic mode, they're coming to us saying, help us with our operating model. We actually think there's a different way of working now. And they're even umming and ahhing. Do we do it now? Do we do it later? And what we would always say to them is, oh no, you do it now. Because when you're coming out the other end, you've got everything right. Yeah, you get to move, you get to go quick, you get to get the talent you're looking for.
I think it's really
Sorry,
Kelly.
I was just going to say, what do you think then, like, if you don't have a HR team that can think this way and provide that value to your leaders, what would you be saying to those leaders out there now listening?
I'd actually say to them, are you sure you don't have that HR team? That's the first thing I'd say to them.
Yeah.
And I'd say to HR people, make sure you're speaking up, because it's all those little niggles you've got in your mind that actually they need to be listening to you now. But then the other thing I'd say to them is, it's okay, you can partner. You can partner with organisations that help you do it, such as ours, for instance. But, you know, chances are, if you take this opportunity now, you will be setting yourselves up in the right way for when you come out the end.
Mm. And what about though too, from a leadership perspective, if leaders are out there thinking, well, like the marketplace for good talent has now been a lot more plentiful because people would have lost their jobs, people would have been made redundant, even the most high performing, fantastic talent may be sitting at home without a job. So some leaders may be out there thinking, well, that's okay, if this person doesn't work out, I can move on to a huge talent pool.
Can I just say something on that? A part of me finds that really exciting, because that is what's happening. There is good people now that don't have jobs. And if you are out there, you will be capturing them. You want to be keeping them warm. You want to know that when you're ready to be recruiting, they're ready to go. And you've treated those, you've found them and you're treating them with respect during this time. This is where your talent acquisition team can really fly. This is where they can go out there and go, okay, these people no longer have jobs. We know that you're good, you know, and you keep them warm, you keep connecting with them. And now more than ever, it's easier to connect. And
there's another side to that as well, though, and that is also that organisations are sitting there hearing from their staff, those forward-thinking organisations, and let's face it, not all organisations are experiencing a retraction. A lot of organisations will grow through COVID, depending on what their area is. You know, in the research that we're looking at, a lot of manufacturing division organisations, etc., they're going through a high growth phase right now. So it's not just that there is talent out in the market who are not working, it is also that there are people sitting in organisations right now, hopefully not yours, saying, okay, I've seen the true colours of my organisation and I'm not sure this is where I want to be in the future. And that's, I think, a critical discussion for us to be having around the HR table and around the leadership table as well, in terms of this is not just the short term of how do we get our organisation through this, but understand that the implications of the decisions that we make, how we communicate them, how we come across as leaders in our organisation, they will have a long-lasting impression, good or bad, on our people. And it will be the kinds of impressions that will either help people feel very solid, connected to your business for the longer term, or alternatively, these will be major disconnecting moments where they say maybe the loyalty I have shown in my company over time hasn't been warranted. Which isn't, I will say, not to say that a lot of organisations are making tough decisions. It's not necessarily about the tough decisions. It's about the way you treat your employees when you're having to make those tough decisions, how you're communicating with them, how you're bringing them along on that journey.
You know, Janine, what I think about there from a HR perspective is the things we could be doing to help our leaders during this time for that very reason. You do not want your high performers sitting back going, I'm going to look elsewhere, and when this all comes down, I'm out. And there's nothing you can do because you've you've hit me in a place that really hurts. So when HR are actually sending out all their pulse surveys or trying to understand what's going on, some of the questions you want in there from a holistic perspective, if you don't have managers able to ask themselves, which really is where it should be happening, some of the questions are, what do you need from us to help you be engaged? What do you see as some risk areas? What do you need from us to help you develop in this particular area? What ideas do you need to start allowing two-way communications, not just from the line managers, but if for those organisations that have got succession plans in place or know who their high performers are, now is the time you want to be connecting them with their line managers, a mentor, even your CEO or GM, people that they respect. Now is the time you put plans in place to say to them and give them strong messages. We don't want you going anywhere. We value you and we're going to work with you. And in fact, now's probably the time you get little workforces together to say, what's working really well? Where can we go with this? What is the new norm? Tell us and let's go.
And I think as part of that, Marianne, really all our critical HR processes are going to need to look different. People will be reskilling, they will be upskilling, those high performers, potentially even maybe taking on new skills. We really do need to create that new mindset of what is that new reality and adjust those HR processes so that they're reflective of this new world.
Go, Janine.
I was just going to say, there's a couple of things that come to mind there. Firstly, you know, we've been talking internally around what are some of the HR processes that really should become front and centre during this period, and things like your performance management discussions. And I like your flavour to them, Marianne. It may not be what it looked like before. It may not be as form driven. You know, there may be different mechanisms you need to use, namely, obviously, webinar style meetings. But I think making sure that people aren't shying away from some of those processes and trying to avoid the conversations is really important, because right now, if your employees are feeling any level of disconnection or any level of feeling devalued through this time, some of those HR processes will be key in trying to make sure that we have strong conversations and that they actually understand how they're viewed in the organisation.
See, I love that comment, Janine, and I get torn by it too, because I hear leaders say, oh, we don't have time to be having, you know, the performance review discussion. You really need to bend their ear to say, actually, now is the time. And if you don't put time aside to really get underneath how your employees are feeling, decisions are going to be made and you're not going to be made aware of them. You need to always be driving it two ways. And actually, this is for, if I'm really honest, one of the times where I do value the performance management process, because even for me, when I saw it pop up, now it's time, my initial reaction was, oh, again? Couldn't help it. And then I sat back and went, actually, no, I need that, and I need that now because I need to get some stuff off my mind. And, you know, if I'm thinking that and I'm HR.
So I should be looking forward to that meeting then, Marianne.
Yeah, we'll have a great time. But it is those, you know, there's some of our tools that some of our managers won't have the discussions without the tools. So we've got to be prepared.
I think it's an important aspect of what we do right now as HR practitioners. I always love, you know, I struggle with the performance management process myself, and I love talking to my team members one-on-one. I just get that little spider sensey crawl thing when it's like, oh, I have to go through this process. So I think one of the things we do need to do as HR practitioners when we look at these processes is to make sure we're checking in and validating when we're getting that feedback from managers about, I don't have time to do it, I don't want to do it, I don't think my staff want to do it. Trying to uncover what is it about it. Is it the way we're currently setting that process up? Is it that the tools that we're providing them are far too complex? What is it? So try to remove the noise from the process that doesn't add value and center it around what is the outcome we want to achieve. We want our people to feel connected at the end of this conversation. We want them to feel valued. We want them to feel that they've had some really great feedback and they can see opportunities for growth. Presumably, this is all the sort of same stuff most other people want out of these conversations. So let's make sure that as we review our processes, we're looking at them to ensure they deliver on that, and we remove the noise that doesn't help us get to that.
So it's all coming back down to communication, and I think really importantly, I mean, we work in an organisation that has an amazing communication platform, but some of the organisations out there probably don't have that same level of communication and aren't necessarily touching in with their employees to get their feedback, to get their insights, to get that noise of what's going on. So what would you recommend for our HR and leaders out there listening today about what they can do to enhance that communication piece?
Janine, I might go first and then you can build on it. Because one of the things I was thinking about as we were having the discussion about performance management is don't forget, and I know I'm telling you all this and you all know it, but you get your CEOs to start that off. You get them to have the discussions. They'll tell you what works and what doesn't work. Shift it and then go out with everybody else. But having it come from the top first is very, very powerful. And then the other part of communication is, if you haven't started doing it 2 ways, start. There's no reason why you cannot start now. Absolutely no reason. And in fact, what you get back from your employees, it generates energies. It generates messages of them feeling valued and wanted by their company. And if you think about it, we're all, I mean, this is a health crisis. We are back, Maslow's hierarchy, we're right at the bottom. We're back at, do we feel safe? Do we have a home? Do we have, and I know a lot of you will have high performing people sitting there going, I don't know if I'm going to have a job after this. And managers might be looking at them going, how can they think that? They are some of our best, but they're thinking that because some great people are losing their jobs and industries are going down. So it's a real thing that people are thinking. And so prepare your line managers for that. Get them ready to have these discussions, even with people they don't think they're going to be having it with.
I think things I see as a leader through this is that the ups and downs. There's high highs, there's low lows, and even, you know, I would say our team is a particularly positive team, generally on the extroversion scale, generally feel pretty good speaking out, and I would say most of those things about myself as well. And even within myself, I see those ebbs and flows of days where I feel like, oh, this just feels too hard to operate in this way, and days when I feel on top of the world, we're flying, we're so future thinking, we're out there. So I think as a leader, recognizing that even if you've had a really great conversation with somebody one day, that doesn't actually mean you put that aside, because 2 days after they might be feeling very differently. You know, it doesn't take much. It doesn't, you know, one customer not renewing a contract, a project that goes south, a webinar that's diabolically challenging. You know, it doesn't take much for that mood to shift. A close friend losing their job, all of those sorts of things, family members going through stress. So I think recognizing that you can't just have a set and forget sort of mentality. And then back to your talking, Callie, around the different mechanisms. I really do think you need to meet your employees with where they're at. So yes, we've got a lot of different platforms. We probably have too many different communication platforms, frankly, between Teams and Skype and Zoom, and you know, we're all over the place. I never know where my next meeting's going to be. But reconnecting and with your employees to find out what's working and what's not. I mean, for us this week, one of the things that we did was have a meeting today where we didn't all have our cameras on and we went for a walk instead. And I don't know about you, but I found that quite a relief to not be face to face with everybody when I've spent all week, every day, meeting after meeting, face to face. So sometimes, in fact, reverting to what we would almost consider before this a little bit old school, and having a teleconference rather than a face-to-face is a great tool. I'm seeing more use of some of our other social tools like WhatsApp, etc. As little groups are popping up, and they're finding different ways to connect that are meaningful for them. So I think it's one thing to have a consistent platform across the business where we say, this is how we conduct our general meetings. Let's shortcut all of the stress that goes into trying to figure out the best way to do that. But also thinking about, who have I got in my team? How do they like to connect? Even from a generational perspective, that'll be slightly different. And trying to tailor your communication strategies towards that, I think, is really powerful.
Do you know where my mind goes when you're talking about that?
No, but I saw it went somewhere.
It went somewhere. I was like, oh my God, our HR people are supposed to now be writing policies on every platform and what needs to happen. Like, you know, part of this is about connecting, and then another part is, how do we connect? How do we go about doing business? And just some time thought around that. And for me, the word policy is one thing, and then framework is another.
And I definitely like the use of framework. I remember sitting through a lawyer talking to us about the you know, some of the social media issues that occur now and how they can translate back into your organisation. And I was sitting thinking, man, everything I post on Facebook could come out, all of those sorts of things. So there are a lot of complexities, I think, in our modern world, and I think some of our policies need to be able to capture that. But I also think that this is a time to, I still remember Jim Beattie, one of my first HR directors that I ever worked for. I valued him so greatly. And he used to say to me, Janine, are we creating this policy for the 95% of people that will do the right thing, or for the 5% who might not? And let's make sure that we don't overburden our employees with policies designed for the 5%. There's a balance to that, because there's some things that are a risk, and we need to make sure that we have those covered. But I also think that it's a good time to think about, when we're producing those policies, are we doing them in a way that bogs down our employees, or do we recognise there's a level of trust we have, there's a level of expectation we have that people will act in a way that aligns to our values, and we will treat our people with the dignity and respect of the fact that they are grown adults and can manage some of these things effectively themselves. Just a thought. It may be an unpopular one, but yeah.
Interesting. And I think as part of that, then, as part of those digital platforms working, and even if you might have many, people are getting very accustomed to this new working from home situation. So as organisations sort of come towards, you know, moving back to offices, what does that actually look like for organisations? And I know, for an example, a colleague of mine or a friend of mine actually said, I don't want to go back to the office. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for my family. It doesn't work for my children. I'm scared for my children because they've got their own health issues. But then for other people that I know, for them it's been about, well, I have to go back to the office. That's my business frame of mind. That's my thought-provoking ideas come from. It allows me to think that way, rather than just being at home and being in that parent mode all the time. So it's interesting, as we move through this digital era and we talk about communication and we talk about this change, what that actually looks like for organisations.
See, and you know what's interesting, when I talk to clients, even within their organisation, there is different thinking about what next. How do we navigate this? Do we all go back to the way it was? Or actually, has this been a platform for change, and how do we take that change forward? And one of the vehicles HR people can use is actually the voice of their own people, the voice of their customers. If things have been working and things are going great, you need to listen to that. And the other part I would say is, from a HR perspective, this is not usual. This is not normal. Like, you literally have everyone in a household. So you have stresses around you that you usually don't. Just then my door opened. I thought it was one of my 4 children running in, and I thought, what do I do? Do I put mute? Do I turn the camera off? You know, but this is how we're working now. And if amongst all of that, things are still getting done, there are real questions to be had. Can we reduce our footprint? Is that money spent elsewhere in our business model in a better way? If we were to spend that money on talent, where could we go?
I think one of the biggest challenges that organisations who don't want to capture this moving forward, and I completely get what you're saying, Callie, there are some people who will always feel more comfortable working in an office environment. That's just what they like. And there are some people who, from an environment perspective, need to work in an office. You know, if you're in a shared house and those sorts of things, you sometimes don't have the setup to do it effectively from home, certainly for the majority of your work life. I think one of the biggest challenges organisations have right now is, in the past, there has been this attitude in many organisations I've worked at with, we don't work from home. That's just not the way we do it. It might be an occasional one-off thing, but that's not our policy. That is not our culture. And, you know, to a greater or lesser extent, many people accept that because that's what that organisation is like. I think coming after this, where you've had months of working from home, if your organisation shifts back to that policy and without any kind of consultation, without any kind of process, for my mind, that is a major disconnecting point, because you've got employees sitting there now saying, hang on a minute, in the past you had arguments that it couldn't work, that it couldn't be done for XYZ reason. Now we have shown that it can work and it can be done, and you're still reverting straight back to the old policy. So it's not just how do we logically go through that thinking and process it, but it's also, I think, to your point, Marianne, if you don't get the voice of your customer, your internal customer, front and center through this, and think very clearly about how you manage that, it may not be just that you don't get to capitalize on what I think could be a major revolution, really, because what other point in life has been able to show us that this can work? But you will also run the risk of disconnecting your staff who do value this as a process and an option. And you know, we go back to our whole talent acquisition and talent retention challenges.
Do you know what else I'm thinking of just with that there? You know, we have line managers now that are having to manage people remotely. That in and of itself, for some line managers, is not an easy feat. So as a HR practitioner, we need to balance. Is it that the managers don't yet have the skills to manage them, and that's where the angst is coming from, if you're beginning to hear differences? So if your employees are saying it's great and I'm getting the work done, but your line manager is saying no, it's not, they're not getting the work done, this is ineffective, we really need to be the ones that say, right, what's actually going on here? Is there investment that needs to be done for line managers on how managing staff looks different when they're virtual or when they're not in front of you? So again, another strong arm of HR moves into how you build capability in organizations. For all of you that are in organizations, how do you help shift the bar, increase the capability of your line managers? Now we've got space now to think about what this could look like, and also increase the capability of your staff using the technology. It's one thing to be thrown into it and work out what to click, what, go to this one with 3 dots and I don't even know, you know, but it's another one to actually say, right, we're going to invest some time now and we're going to help you through this. We're going to give you the tools that you need to really have a go at this.
Yeah, I think it's also
sorry.
Yeah, because I've had a lot of conversation with leaders about this. It's a really topical conversation now about, okay, we're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. We're starting to see a shift back into the office. It will be gradual. And then what happens? And I think it's really fair to say that it's time to take some learnings to recognise that there are some aspects that may be tough, that may be more difficult. And I was talking to a manager yesterday who's saying, Janine, for our more junior people who would typically learn through shadowing and being on a project with someone, this has been, you know, we feel like they're several months behind in their development right now. And so to your point, Marianne, there may be ways to shift that. There may be ways to improve that. There also might be discussions that need to have around, so there are some aspects that will naturally be more easily done in a face-to-face environment, but we still need to have the discussion around what can we effectively do in this remote working environment. So for us, we were doing project charters, team charters for flexibility before this hit, and I'm sure if we went back now and reviewed those team charters and said, right, what did we think the challenges were around flexibility before? How did we resolve most of those issues, and what are the commitments we make for ourselves as a team now? I think there would be, I mean, we were already a pretty flexible team, and you know, and we've dealt with this pretty well, but I think we would still make some shifts and changes to that. And there'll be other teams that I know were really struggling to come up with a project charter around how we work flexibly, that again, we'll see a shift. It may not go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, but I do really hope that we will see a significant shift with people feeling that they can work more flexibly.
Do you know what's lovely about this time? If I was just to think about some of the loveliness of it, not the other aspects that have been very trying for all of us, but organisations now have a new capability. We are able to do work differently, and you can see how quickly people can change that, like how quickly that can shift. So just think about when you're thinking about what capabilities you need in your business, if there's a breakout, if you need to fling back to working from home because there's something that's going on, You don't want to lose that capability. You don't want to have to start. I know it won't be from the beginning again, but you don't want to waste a lot of people's energies in having to, you know, do it all again from the beginning.
It's a bit like when you're training for a triathlon, not that I've ever done that, but I've heard, if you're training for a triathlon and you do all of that work and you get toned and you've got your muscles happening and you've got your stamina, and then if you just stop and, you know, 3 months later, you try to do that again, you're almost starting from ground zero. So I would really love to see that organisations really do invest time, and I think now is the time to do it. I think from a HR team perspective, we've gone through the crisis management. Most of us should now be working on plans for what does the return to work look like, and I think getting some advice on, you know, if you've had employees stood down, how are you starting to slowly bring them back up as you see your workload come back? Those sorts of things are going to be really challenging questions. So there's going to be time invested for some industries, retail, etc., on managing that. And then there's going to need to really be a piece of work that's happening alongside all of that. That's about how are we taking on board these learnings, and how are we making sure that those muscles are continuing to be used in the longer term now.
Janine, I just want to add to what you were saying, and that is the people that have been stood down. Yes, we've got to think about how we bring them back, but also until you bring them back, people in HR think about how do you keep them engaged,
Connected.
you know, people connecting with them, letting them know what's happening, because for them it would be not a great place to be, and how you treat them during this time and stay connected with them, I think will be very, very powerful and something they will remember, as well as your customers and the stories that come out about your business and how you operate, really in the long run.
Absolutely. That is really true. And I think for that long run, it's not just with that connection with those stand down employees, but a little bit like we talked about earlier in regards to that communication. It's all around that mental health and well-being. The research says that 53% of women and 37% of men say the current pandemic has impacted their mental health, and 19% of these had a major impact. So as we move forward, we need to continuously ensure we look after our employees' health and well-being. This is a vital part of core HR.
You know what I love about what you're saying there, Kelly, not the fact that people are affected, that's awful, but the fact that HR can actually play a role in it is very powerful. So our ability now to start to increase the capability of our line managers so they can begin to have some conversations. Think about the third party, you know, organizations you partner with. Do they offer services for line managers? Do they offer services for your employees? How are you communicating this? What kind of services do they have? So the whole mental health area, if you are able to give your employees a platform or somewhere or someone they can go to, it is a very wonderful way. In amongst some other things that we're seeing clients do, like the exercising, the meditations, the group walks, things that companies are now doing to stay connected and to kind of bring to the forefront the mental health of their people.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to our trivia night tonight. Hey, I'm just going to pause this here before we start to wrap up with our final sort of areas, Callie, and just check. So if you're online right now, if there is some questions that you'd like to ask, this is a great time to send them through. As you can see, we're quite happy to talk about almost anything that's remotely people related and business related. So by all means, send those messages through on your question panel and they'll come through to us. Callie, was there anything else we wanted to cover off before we wrap up today?
I think we've pretty much covered it all. We've talked about leadership, we've talked about culture, we've talked about communication, we've talked about those key HR processes, and we've also talked just very briefly there on the mental health, which is such a really important part, which is why we've actually sort of left that to the end, because we really do need to continue to look after our employees' health and well-being. But if there's any other questions or if there's any other further remarks from yourself, Janine or Marianne, feel free to add it now.
Marianne?
The only thing I wanted to add on the wellbeing piece is a lot of us would have flung into gear with policies we've already had about working from home, or you know, upgrades to that. What we want to do now as a HR community is actually sit back and go, do we have the right things in place? Will this protect us legally? So it's one thing at the beginning of it where we're thrown into just trying to get people to work. Now what you want to ensure is that your people are set up appropriately, their laptops are where they need to be, because you don't want longer term issues coming. So now's probably the time you partner with somebody and make sure what you've got in place is in fact what needs to be in place as you move forward.
It's a really good point. I do remember seeing a photo of one of our team members using an ironing board as a desk for the first couple of days, and we have rectified that. So there are very, very short-term solutions that I think everybody kind of went, let's just figure it out. But what we wouldn't want to see is employees for the longer term working in environments that are really just not set up for them. And it might be part of what needs to come into play when you're starting to think about your return to work strategies. You know, we're going through lots of debate right now around how it looks like when people do start to come back to the office, and there are a whole lot of factors that might need to be considered, including areas like how are they getting to work. Yes, Marianne?
Keep going, Janine. I'll add, keep going.
Okay, how are they getting to work? If they're coming by public transport, are you thinking about different areas in terms of, are we going to be much more flexible in the hours that we allow people to work so that they can travel outside peak time? You know, we were talking yesterday about some people wanting to start work at 3 a.m. And finish at lunchtime, because that just means that they're not traveling in peak times. Thinking about for those employees who really struggle to work from home because their environment is just not set up for it, what does that look like for them now? Do they get to come back quicker than those who are saying, actually, my home environment is okay? And then there's a whole host of other challenges because we still have our school environment to balance, and every single one of us on the call have children here at home. Now mine are actually probably outside in the rain at the moment because I told my husband not to let them in the house. But you know, we've got challenges to manage there, and if our schools are only going back 1 day a week in term 3 here in New South Wales, then what does that actually look like if we're asking the parents to come back into the office? So there's a lot of considerations that need to start coming out into play in how we enact the return to work.
And what's pivotal about that, because we're still not clear and we're not sure, HR professionals now, their ability to keep things flexible and allowing people to juggle, because we still don't know.
Yeah,
It's, I think, very, very important. So don't lose what you've already gained. Now it's about, you know, until we're certain, we're going to give people choices, or this is what you're asking us to do, and this is how we're going to move forward. And the one thing I want to add to that, Janine, as well, is as you start to get people coming back to work, you don't want them feeling like they can't say they don't feel well. If they've got a tickly throat or their nose is running, you do not want them in the office. You do not want them in your manufacturing plant. So your ability to keep those lines of communication open, saying, if you're not well, but you're well enough to work, please work from home. Or, you know, separate yourself. It's very important to keep your operations running and moving forward. You don't want that to sleep. I reckon it's one of the first things that'll go.
I think it's one of those interesting dynamics. Culturally, we've always been I'll tough it out, I'll come into the office no matter what. It was almost a badge of honor that you came into the office when you were sick. And I hope that will be one of the things that really gets thrown out now, that there is no badge of honor to that. What is the badge of honor is that you make the decision early, if you're feeling symptoms of illness, that you stay home. And I would love to see that there's a level of hygiene and just social practices that come into play that really start to help reduce these sorts of, not just the pandemics, but the whole flu season in general.
Yeah. Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Exactly. And my children are brilliant now with 20-second hand washing. Sometimes I swear to God they take a whole minute. But so I think that's it from us then today. I really appreciate everybody dialing in. I hope you found this valuable. If you did have some questions that you didn't want to raise during the session, by all means reach out to any one of us separately. You will have our contact details coming out to you afterwards. We always have a bit of fun on these sessions, so I hope you actually enjoy dialing into them. And for those of you who are sitting in standalone HR roles, maybe it's like having a team meeting. that, you know, unfortunately not able to interject into. Thank you again. Thanks, Callie and Marianne, for all of your work through this, because we've had some challenging periods for supporting our clients, and I'm sure it's not over yet, but we'll be back next month with another webinar topic.
Good luck, everyone.
To everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.